It had been a gray morning, the kind where the clouds seemed too tired to cry, but too burdened to lift. A thin drizzle whispered across the city skyline, draping everything in a soft, shimmering mist. It was the kind of day that made even the richest homes feel quiet, and even the loudest streets hush for a while. Jonathan Maddox, billionaire, philanthropist, and father, stood at the edge of a small hill in Willow Creek Cemetery. No security, no chauffeur waiting by the gate, no assistant fussing over his schedule, just him, and the quiet sound of raindrops landing softly on the petals of the white lilies he carried. He visited this grave once every week, always on a Thursday, no matter what meetings he had, no matter what boardroom waited. Thursday belonged to his son, Mason. Mason had been just 8 years old. Cheeky smile, a knack for puzzles, and the kind of laugh that made you forget bad days. It had been 5 years since the accident, yet Jonathan still felt like the loss had occurred only yesterday. The pain didn't fade, it just learned how to hide better. As he knelt to place the lilies beside the stone, his fingers brushed the cold marble. The words etched there still hurt to read. Mason Elijah Maddox, beloved son, forever 8. Jonathan exhaled slowly, eyes misty, not from the rain. But just as he was about to rise, something caught his attention. A small figure, huddled beneath a tree just a few feet away, barely visible in the mist. At first, he thought she might be a mourner, but the figure didn't move. No umbrella, no coat, just a tangle of unbrushed hair, oversized clothing, and a gaze that didn't flinch from his. A child, maybe 11 or 12, thin, dirty hands clutching a threadbare backpack. Jonathan hesitated, not out of fear. He wasn't afraid of people, but out of confusion. Why would a child be here? Alone? And watching him? He cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her. You visiting someone? He asked, his voice calm, kind, but cautious. The girl blinked, then looked away. No. Are you okay? I'm fine, she mumbled, clearly not fine. Jonathan waited. He didn't push. The silence stretched. Eventually, she stood and turned to leave. But before she vanished between the gravestones, she paused. You bring white lilies every week, she said, not looking at him. Mason liked them. Jonathan's heart skipped. His hands clenched instinctively. How do you know his name? The girl didn't reply. She simply walked away. He stood there in the rain, the lilies damp now against the marble. The image of her shrinking silhouette burned into his thoughts, and for the first time in years, something stirred in his chest, something that felt strangely like curiosity and the faintest thread of hope. Jonathan couldn't shake her from his mind. That night, as the rain tapped gently against his bedroom window, he sat by the fire with a cup of untouched tea. His home, grand, silent, and perfectly designed, felt emptier than usual. The warmth of the flames did little to soften the chill he'd brought back from the cemetery. He didn't know why it bothered him so much. She hadn't done anything wrong, just a kid, watching. But there was something in her voice, something haunting, familiar, as if she had whispered to a part of him that had been asleep for years. The next Thursday, he brought 2 sets of lilies. He arrived earlier this time, under the same bent willow tree. The air was quiet, peaceful. A bluebird hopped near a gravestone, pecking at the wet grass. But she wasn't there. He waited and waited. No sign of her. He felt a strange emptiness settle in his chest, like disappointment dressed as worry. He left the extra bouquet on Mason's grave, just in case. The week passed, then another. Still no sign of the girl. Until, one late afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Jonathan arrived to find the lilies missing. He blinked. He was sure he'd left them. He even remembered the way the petals had been slightly curled on one side. But they were gone. Not blown away. Not moved. Gone. As if someone had taken them gently, carefully. Then he spotted it. A small folded piece of paper, weighed down by a smooth river stone at the base of the headstone. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked it up. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. He told me lilies were his favorite. Thank you for bringing them." No name, no signature, just a scribbled drawing in the corner. A child's sketch of a boy with spiky hair, holding hands with a girl wearing a backpack. Jonathan sat there, stunned. The paper shook in his hands. Who was this girl? And how did she know his son? The next day, for the first time since Mason's passing, Jonathan did something completely impulsive. He canceled his meetings, switched off his phone, and returned to the cemetery. But this time, he wasn't carrying just flowers. He brought a small blanket, a thermos of warm cocoa, and a peanut butter sandwich, cut diagonally, just the way Mason used to like. He laid everything out gently on the grass beside the grave and waited. Just as the sun began to kiss the tops of the trees, she appeared. Same tattered hoodie, same cautious eyes. But this time, she didn't run. She stood a few feet away, watching him as if unsure whether to trust what she was seeing. "I brought something," Jonathan said softly, lifting the thermos. "It's warm. You look like you could use it." She didn't move. "Or you can just sit. You don't have to say anything." For a long while, she said nothing. But then, slowly, she stepped forward, sat on the edge of the blanket, knees drawn up. He handed her the sandwich first. She devoured it in seconds. Then the cocoa. She sipped it like it was the finest thing in the world. Only then did he speak again. "I'm Jonathan," he said. She didn't reply. "What's your name?" She paused, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. "People just call me Kit." "Is that your real name?" She shrugged. "It's the only one I've got." A silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Jonathan looked at her carefully. Dirt-smudged cheeks, torn shoes, eyes far too old for her age. "Kit," he said gently, "how did you know Mason?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the headstone, her face softening. "He was my best friend." Jonathan's heart skipped. "That's not possible," he said, voice barely a whisper. "He died 5 years ago." She nodded. "I know." Jonathan felt the weight of her words settle like fog across his thoughts. She said it so simply, so casually. "He was my best friend." Yet Mason had died 5 years ago. And this girl, she looked barely older than 10 or 11. The math didn't make sense. He studied her face again. Not for signs of deceit. He didn't feel that from her, but for a deeper truth. Something she perhaps didn't know how to say yet. How old are you, Kit? She took another slow sip from the cocoa thermos, not answering right away. Almost 12, she said finally. Next month, I think. Jonathan blinked. So, you would have been, what, 6 or 7? When Mason, Kit looked down. 6.5. I remember because it was right after I got taken out of school. His breath caught in his throat. What happened? He asked gently. She shrugged. Dad left. Mom got sick. We moved around a lot. Didn't have time for school after that. Jonathan didn't push. Her small hands trembled slightly, even while wrapped around the warm cup. And the way she stared at the headstone, it wasn't fake. It wasn't made up. You said he was your best friend, Jonathan said quietly. But how? Where did you meet? Kit smiled faintly. The first true smile he'd seen from her. It was a little crooked, but soft and full of something rare. Memory. There was this playground, she began, voice distant like she was traveling back in her mind. Behind St. Mary's Hospital. Hidden, kind of. No swings or anything fancy, just an old sandbox, a tunnel slide, and this broken merry-go-round that creaked like it was haunted. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. I remember that place. Mason hated it. Said the slide smelled like old milk. Kit laughed softly. Yeah, he said that every time. Her voice faded a bit, and her eyes glazed with emotion. I used to wait there while my mom had her treatments inside, sometimes for hours. I didn't have toys or anything. I'd just dig in the dirt or make up games in my head. And one day, she continued, he showed up. Red jacket, shoelaces untied, started helping me build a castle in the sandbox without even saying hello. Jonathan could see it clearly. That was Mason. Bold, curious, kind. He told me his name was Captain Mays, and I could be his first mate if I brought cookies next time. So I did. And after that, we just kept meeting there. Her voice cracked slightly. He didn't care that my clothes were dirty, or that I didn't talk much. He just liked me, and he made me feel like I was part of something, like I belonged somewhere. Jonathan's throat tightened. He had never heard this side of his son's story. He hadn't even known Mason had met anyone regularly at the hospital playground. Then again, he'd been busy. Meetings, stockholders, endless calls. Back then, he believed being a good father meant buying the best toys, planning big birthdays, and scheduling quality time between flights. Kit wiped her nose with her sleeve, glancing away. He stopped showing up one day, she whispered. I waited for a week straight, every afternoon, in the cold. I thought I did something wrong. Jonathan felt his chest ache. He didn't stop coming because of you, Kit. He got sick. Very fast. She nodded. I figured that out eventually. I used to sneak into the hospital just to try and see him. But the nurses always caught me. They didn't know who I was. I wasn't family. Jonathan blinked back tears. I'm so sorry. Kit reached into her backpack and pulled something out. A small wooden figure, roughly carved, shaped like a fox with uneven ears. He made this, she said. Said it was my loyal guardian. I kept it every day since. Jonathan reached out, but stopped himself. She wasn't offering it. She was showing it. And that meant more. The sun was beginning to set behind the trees. A soft golden hue fell across the graveyard, casting shadows over the worn stones and the old willow tree. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a voice as soft as the breeze, Jonathan said, "You gave my son something beautiful in his last months, a friend who didn't care about his last name or his family's money." Kit blinked, surprised, maybe even confused. And then Jonathan added, with the faintest smile, "And for what it's worth, I think he would have wanted you to have the lilies." A soft drizzle began to fall as they sat there together. Jonathan, the grieving billionaire, and Kit, the girl with no home, but a heart full of stories. Neither of them moved right away. The rain wasn't harsh. It was quiet, gentle, like nature itself had decided to whisper along with them. Kit tugged her hood over her head. Jonathan, without thinking, pulled his coat off and held it over her. She blinked up at him, surprised, then smiled shyly and shifted closer under its shelter. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." They sat like that for several minutes, the air between them light and strangely comforting. Jonathan couldn't remember the last time he had shared silence with someone that didn't feel awkward, that didn't demand to be filled with small talk or politeness. "I used to come here a lot," Kit finally said, "even when I didn't know which grave was his. I just sat under this tree, talked out loud, hoping he could hear." Jonathan's eyebrows lifted. "Why, here?" She hesitated, then looked up at the willow branches swaying overhead. "Because it felt soft," she said, "like maybe it wouldn't judge me for missing someone I barely got to keep." That struck something deep in him. How often had he done the same, sitting by his son's grave, whispering confessions he couldn't say to anyone else, his regrets, his anger at fate, his guilt for never being there enough. "Kit," he said gently, "where are you staying?" She stiffened a little. The tension was subtle, but he caught it. "I manage," she mumbled. "That's not an answer." She stayed quiet. He didn't push, but his voice softened. "There's a shelter a few miles from here. It's safe. I could take you." She shook her head quickly. "They've got rules, curfews, questions. I don't do well with those." Jonathan frowned. "You've been on your own for a while, haven't you?" She looked down and picked at a blade of grass. "Since my mom passed, couple years now." The rain began to pick up, trickling down Jonathan's collar. But he didn't care. His heart was cracking open, slowly, painfully, and in ways he hadn't expected. "I didn't even cry," she whispered. "When she died, I mean, I just packed her photo and left before someone took me away. She always said not to trust anyone who didn't listen." Jonathan inhaled slowly. "That's a heavy thing to carry alone." Kit gave a small nod. "I don't mind being alone. Not really. It's just, sometimes, it's hard to remember what it feels like to be warm." Those words hit him harder than any business failure ever had. Not warm from blankets or weather, warm from care, from being seen. He looked at her, this small soul sitting beside his son's grave, and realized something he hadn't in years. Mason had not only given this girl joy, she had given Mason peace, a connection, a secret friendship in a world that was falling apart for both of them. He couldn't walk away again. Not this time. "Kit," he said, his voice steady but kind. What, if I promised you something? She looked at him cautiously. Promises don't mean much. Mine will, he said, because I've broken enough to know I can't afford another. She waited, her expression unreadable. I'm not asking you to trust me today, Jonathan said, but I'd like to come here next week. Same day, same time, and if you show up, I'll bring something. Books, maybe, or paint, or whatever you like. No pressure, no expectations. Kit blinked slowly. You don't even know me. He smiled softly. Neither did Mason, but it didn't stop him. She looked away, biting her lip. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees around them. I'll think about it, she finally said. That's all I ask. Jonathan stood, pulling the coat back on and brushing the grass from his trousers. As he turned to leave, Kit spoke, again, quietly, almost as if afraid of being heard. Bring marshmallows next time. He looked back, raising an eyebrow. For the cocoa, she said, pretending not to smile. He chuckled. Deal. And with that, he walked away. But this time, his steps felt lighter, and for the first time in 5 long years, he didn't leave the cemetery alone in spirit. The week stretched long and slow. Jonathan found himself thinking of Kit far more than he expected. During board meetings, in traffic, even while walking through the halls of his penthouse apartment. There was something haunting about her eyes, not in a frightening way, but in how they held old pain wrapped inside a child's face. He wandered into his late son's room one evening. The door had stayed closed for years, gathering dust and memories. The air was still, heavy with silence. Masons, trophies still lined the shelves, untouched. His baseball glove lay curled on the desk, frozen in time. A sketchbook rested on the edge of the bed, half open to a drawing of a fox with a crooked tail. Jonathan sat down and stared at it. He wondered if it was for her, for Kit, for the friend who had met him at the playground behind the hospital, the girl who brought cookies and didn't ask why he limped or why his hands trembled when he held a crayon. He felt something shift in him, a fragile stitch coming loose from a wound he had tried too long to ignore. That Saturday, he returned to the cemetery earlier than before. He brought marshmallows and sketchbooks and a scarf the color of soft lilac, the kind a child might think looked magical in the right light. He sat under the willow tree, with a blanket spread beneath him. A gentle wind stirred the branches above. The clouds looked heavy, like they might cry soon, but the air stayed dry. Minutes passed, then half an hour. He began to wonder if she'd come. Then, from between the rows of gravestones, he saw her, Kit, wearing the same old gray hoodie, the strings chewed and uneven, but her eyes lit up when she saw the steam rising from the thermos. You remembered the marshmallows, she said, sitting down beside him. I remember things that matter, he said softly. They sipped in quiet for a while. Jonathan opened one of the sketchbooks and handed her a pencil. Want to draw something? He offered. She tilted her head. What if I'm bad at it? He smiled. Then we'll be bad at it together. Kit giggled and flipped to the first page. She drew slowly at first, hesitant, guarded. But then the lines began to take form. A tree, a fox, a small figure with tangled hair and a scarf wrapped like armor. Jonathan watched her, not judging, just listening with his eyes. I used to dream about a house with a garden, she murmured suddenly, big enough to grow strawberries and lie in the grass without getting yelled at. He nodded, taking a slow breath. That sounds peaceful. She didn't look at him. In my dreams, I'd live there with Mason. He'd grow the flowers, and I'd grow the berries. Jonathan felt his heart swell and break all at once. I wish I had known, he whispered. Kit's voice barely carried. I think he didn't tell you, because it was ours, our secret garden. A lump formed in his throat. I missed so much, he admitted. Kit glanced at him now, her eyes not angry, just curious. Why? He hesitated. I thought I was doing the right thing, providing, building a legacy. I thought if I made the world safer and more powerful for him, that would be enough. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, but he just wanted someone to sit in the dirt with him. Jonathan closed his eyes. She was right, and it hurt more because it came from a child who had nothing, yet understood everything. I didn't get it then, he said, but I do now, and if you'll let me, maybe I can help you grow your strawberries. She looked at him sideways. No promises? No promises, he said gently. Just time, and warmth, and maybe a little sunlight when the clouds allow it. Kit smiled, a real one this time, one that crept up slowly, like morning light. They stayed there until the sky turned violet. Kit added a second fox to her drawing. This one had a tie and crooked glasses. Is that me? Jonathan asked, amused. Kit nodded. You're the tired-looking one. He laughed softly. Fair enough. A few more Saturdays passed. Jonathan came to the cemetery every week, like clockwork, bringing warm drinks and whatever small surprise he thought Kit might enjoy. A scarf with little embroidered stars, a tin of old watercolor paints, even a book of fairy tales, one week that she pretended not to care about, but read cover to cover. They didn't talk about everything, but they talked about enough. Kit, for the first time in a long time, wasn't invisible. And Jonathan, he was learning to breathe again, not just through his lungs, but through the ache in his chest that had gone numb for years. One afternoon, as they sat together under the willow, Kit tucked her knees to her chest and asked, what was Mason really like? Jonathan smiled gently, tracing the rim of his coffee cup, curious, quiet at first, but bold when you least expected it. He once tried to build a flying machine out of popsicle sticks and shoelaces. Kit grinned. Sounds about right. He loved animals, could never pass a dog without asking its name, but he hated carrots with a passion. Smart kid, Kit said, giggling. Jonathan leaned back against the trunk of the tree. What about you? What were you like before? Kit was quiet for a long time. Then she shrugged. Loud, I think. I sang all the time, even in stores. Embarrassed my mom constantly. But she never told me to stop. Jonathan watched her face shift, caught somewhere between memory and longing. She said, my voice made the world less gray. He swallowed the knot in his throat. I think she was right. They didn't say anything for a while after that, just watched the wind dance through the branches. Eventually, Jonathan reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to her gently. "What's this?" she asked, cautious. "It's not a check," he said, "or anything like that." She opened it slowly. Inside was a faded photograph. Mason, standing beside a small garden bed, his hands covered in dirt. In the corner, a little sign read, "Kit's Corner." Her fingers trembled as she held it. "I found it in an old photo album," Jonathan said. "He'd named that part of the yard after you. I had no idea until I saw it." Kit blinked fast, like she was trying to keep the tears from spilling. "He never forgot me," she whispered. "No," Jonathan said softly. "He never did." That night, when he got home, Jonathan stood in front of his mirror for a long time. He looked older than he remembered, gray in places, heavier around the eyes. But he also looked less hollow. He glanced around his empty apartment, clean, elegant, silent, and he realized something with startling clarity. All his wealth couldn't fill the quiet, but maybe kindness could. The next morning, he made a call. It took 2 hours, a long conversation with his attorney, and a visit to a friend who ran a local community center. But by the end of the day, a plan was in motion. The following weekend, when Kit arrived under the willow, Jonathan was already waiting, this time with more than just cocoa. He handed her a small key, not flashy, not heavy, just simple. "What's this for?" she asked. "There's a cottage," he said, "about 30 minutes from here. It used to belong to my mother. Has a garden out back, big enough for strawberries, and a bedroom with a window that catches the morning light." Kit's eyes widened. "I'm not asking you to move in today," he said gently, "or even tomorrow. But if the day ever comes when you're ready to stop running, that door will be open." She looked down at the key, then up at him. "I don't want charity," she said, her voice tight. "It's not charity," he replied. "It's an invitation to something better, something yours." Kit bit her lip. Her fingers curled around the key slowly, like it might disappear if she wasn't careful. "Can I bring my books?" He smiled. "You can bring whatever makes it feel like home." She nodded. Just once, but it was enough. And in that moment, under the willow tree, where grief once bloomed, something new began to grow. Hope. It wasn't all easy after that. Hope is a delicate thing. It doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in like the sunrise, slow, golden, uncertain. And for someone like Kit, who'd spent so long in the shadows, stepping into the light could feel almost painful. She didn't take the cottage key right away. She kept it tucked in her shoe, like a secret promise she wasn't quite ready to trust. Some days she showed up early, full of quiet chatter and shy smiles. Other days, she didn't come at all. Jonathan never pressed. He just returned, week after week, sitting under the willow, waiting with cocoa and extra marshmallows. He understood now. Healing can't be hurried, especially for hearts that had been broken in silence. But one rainy morning changed everything. Jonathan was reading in the penthouse when his phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. He answered on instinct. "Hello?" There was a long pause, then a voice, small and wet with panic. "It's Kit." He sat up straight. "What's wrong?" "I didn't know who else to call," she whispered. He He found me. Jonathan's breath caught. Who? My mom's old boyfriend. The one who used to. Before she died. I thought he was gone, but he saw me at the bus station. He followed me. Her voice cracked. I ran. I ran so fast, but where are you now? Jonathan asked gently, grabbing his coat with one hand, keys with the other. I'm hiding behind a diner. On 7th and Maple. Stay right there. I'm coming. He didn't wait for a response. The phone slipped into his pocket as he raced to the elevator. The city blurred past his windshield, rain pelting the windows like nervous fingers. His chest ached with something he couldn't quite name. Fear, rage, helplessness, all of it mixed, with one clear thought. Please let her be okay. He found her just where she said she'd be, huddled beneath a back stairwell, soaked through, her hoodie clinging to her thin frame. He pulled over and got out, ignoring the rain as he knelt in front of her. It's okay, he said. I'm here now. She didn't speak, just collapsed into his arms like a string cut loose. He wrapped his coat around her and held her tight, not like a billionaire, not like a rescuer, just like someone who cared. When they got to the car, she sat curled in the passenger seat, shivering. Jonathan turned the heat all the way up and handed her a dry towel from the back. I'm sorry, she murmured. I didn't know where else to go. He looked at her, so small, so brave, and said, You don't have to be sorry. You did the hardest thing already. You asked for help. He took her to a hotel for the night, not a grand, marble-covered place, just a quiet little inn with a fireplace in the lobby and a lady at the desk who offered them cocoa with extra whipped cream. Kit didn't say much that evening, but she didn't let go of the towel either, or the key. It was in her hand now, not her shoe, and she held it like a life raft. The next morning, Jonathan offered her the cottage again. No speeches, no pressure, just a simple, quiet truth. It's safe, it's warm, and it's yours when you're ready. She looked at him, blinking sleep from her eyes. I think I'm ready now. He drove her there himself, through winding roads and wildflower fields. The air smelled like rain-soaked earth and honeysuckle. The cottage was small, but strong. A pale yellow door, a garden overrun with weeds, but bursting with potential. A swing on the porch that creaked like it had stories of its own. Kit stepped inside and stood still. It was the first time in years she had walked into a space without fear. This is really mine, she whispered. Jonathan smiled. Yours to paint, to plant, to sing in, to rest in, for as long as you want. She turned slowly, and for the first time, she didn't look lost. She looked home. The cottage came alive in ways neither of them expected. Kit started small, sweeping dust from the floor, pulling weeds from the garden, patching up little corners that time had forgotten. She didn't ask Jonathan for help, but he showed up anyway, with paint samples and gardening gloves, and a box full of mismatched mugs that made her laugh. She picked the color Sunrise Blush for the kitchen, because it looks like hope before coffee, she explained with a crooked grin. Jonathan watched her work with quiet awe. This girl, this young woman, was rebuilding more than just a house. She was rebuilding herself. Every shelf she dusted, every cracked tile she mended. It wasn't about cleaning. It was about reclaiming something the world had stolen from her. He came by once or twice a week, never uninvited, always bringing something thoughtful: a wind chime for the porch, lavender seeds for the flower bed, a dog-eared cookbook Mason used to love. She never asked why he was doing all this. Maybe part of her didn't want to know, but another part, the part that still believed in stories, she hoped the answer was simple: because I matter. One afternoon, she was painting a mural on the back wall of the living room. Soft clouds, scattered stars, a tree with golden leaves. When she heard a knock, she opened the door, and Jonathan stood there with a strange look on his face. Not worried, not sad, just thoughtful. "I brought you something," he said, holding out a wrapped bundle. Inside was a stack of papers, typed, clipped together, neat as always, but the title made her blink. "The Girl Under the Willow Tree, a story of second chances." She looked up, confused. "It's about you," he said. "Well, inspired by you. I've been writing, just bits and pieces." Kit ran her hand over the cover page. "It's beautiful. I wasn't sure if I should share it yet," Jonathan admitted, "but I think maybe the story belongs to both of us now." She sat down on the porch swing, reading the first page aloud softly. Her voice was gentle, clear, like wind through wheat. After a while, she stopped and looked at him. "Do you really believe in second chances?" she asked. Jonathan met her gaze, steady and warm. "I didn't. Not until you." She smiled. Not a small smile, a full, eyes crinkling, sun breaking through kind of smile. They sat on the porch for hours after that, trading old stories and silly memories. She told him about the time she tried to train a squirrel to fetch grapes. He told her about Mason's brief but passionate obsession with juggling, and as twilight fell, casting soft gold over the cottage, Jonathan realized something simple and enormous. He wasn't visiting a girl at the edge of the world anymore. He was spending time with a woman who was becoming the center of her own. Kit was still scared sometimes. She still had nightmares and bad days. But now, she had a lock on her door, a light in her window, a future she could touch. She wasn't just surviving. She was blooming. The cottage was peaceful now. Kit had made it so. The windowsills were lined with hand-painted flower pots. The bookshelf overflowed with second-hand novels and poetry. There was even a tiny record player that clicked gently as it played Mason's favorite jazz. But even in peaceful places, shadows sometimes whisper. It was early spring when Kit decided to finally explore the attic. She hadn't been up there before. Something about it made her uneasy. Maybe the creaky stairs, or the silence that hung heavy just beneath the roof. But on this particular day, armed with a flashlight and a stepladder, she gathered her courage. The attic door groaned as it opened. Dust danced in the beam of light, and the air smelled of cedar and old paper. There were boxes stacked neatly, untouched for years. Some were labeled, others weren't. She pulled one toward her, faded tape, brittle cardboard, and gently peeled it open. Inside were photographs, stacks of them. At first she didn't recognize the faces, but then, slowly, the pieces came together. There was Mason, barely older than she was now, grinning beside a younger Jonathan. A Christmas tree, a birthday cake, a beach trip, then another photo. Mason again, this time with a girl. She was maybe 7 or 8, with big eyes, tangled curls, and a crooked smile. She was holding Mason's hand. They looked happy, familiar. Kit's breath caught in her throat. She flipped the photo over. Mason and Ellie, June 2010. Her hands began to shake. Ellie, her real name. No one had called her that in years. She dug deeper, faster now. Old notebooks, crayon drawings, a journal, page after page, memories, sealed in cardboard and time, letters, emails, even a birthday card. To my brave little Ellie. Jonathan had known. He had known who she was. She stumbled back, her mind spinning. Why hadn't he told her? Why pretend he didn't recognize her? Was it pity, guilt, or something worse? The attic suddenly felt colder, smaller. She grabbed one of the photos and hurried down the stairs, her heart thudding painfully against her ribs. Jonathan was at the cottage that afternoon. He'd brought over a picnic, quiche, fruit, lemonade. He barely had time to say hello before she thrust the photo at him. Tell me the truth, she said, her voice quiet, shaking. You knew I was Ellie. Jonathan looked down at the photo, then back at her. Yes, he said softly. I knew. Tears pricked her eyes. How long? Since the graveyard, he said. That day when you said Mason's name. Your voice. It broke me. I remembered. Then why didn't you say anything? He set the picnic basket down slowly. Because I didn't want to take your story from you. You were so scared, so fragile. I wanted you to come back to yourself on your own terms. Not because a billionaire pointed at a photo and said, "Oh, I remember you." She folded her arms, trembling. So, you just waited? I watched, he said, and hoped, and prayed. And when you were ready, I thought maybe you'd find it on your own. And you did. There was silence then, a long, heavy pause full of everything unspoken. Kit turned away, biting her lip. It feels like betrayal. I understand that, Jonathan said, but it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be protection. She didn't answer. Not at first. Instead, she sat down on the porch swing and looked out at the garden. It was blooming wildly now. Yellow daisies, purple hyacinths, a stubborn little rose bush she'd coaxed back to life. After a while, she whispered, I don't know how to feel. You don't have to, he said. Feel nothing. Feel everything. I'll be here either way. She looked over at him. In his eyes, she saw no judgment, just grief, love, patience, and maybe slowly, trust. She held the photo close to her chest. Missed him every day, she said. I used to wonder why he stopped writing, why he never came to find me. Jonathan's face tightened. He tried, Ellie. He really did. He didn't know where your mom took you. I think it broke him. She nodded, wiping a tear. And I guess maybe this is how he finds me now. They sat in silence again, the air thick with memory and forgiveness. And then, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, she said something that surprised them both. Tell me more about him. About Mason. Jonathan smiled. I'd love to. Jonathan pulled a small, worn box from a shelf inside the cottage, dust swirling softly in the late afternoon light. This belonged to Mason, he said, setting the box carefully on the table. He kept letters, notes, things he wrote but never sent. Kit's eyes lingered on the box like it was a treasure chest waiting to be unlocked. Jonathan opened it slowly, revealing bundles of yellowed envelopes tied with faded ribbons and scraps of paper covered in neat handwriting. He handed her the first letter. It was addressed to a Dear Ellie. Her breath hitched. She unfolded the fragile paper, feeling the cool texture beneath her fingertips. The letter began with Mason's familiar handwriting, warm, tender, full of hope. He wrote about his dreams, about the adventures he wanted to have with her, about the quiet strength he saw in her that even she hadn't yet discovered. As Kit read on, tears welled in her eyes, not just for Mason, but for the boy who loved her fiercely, despite all the odds. Jonathan watched her, a quiet smile on his lips. These letters, they were Mason's way of holding on. He never gave up on me, Kit whispered. No, Jonathan said softly, and neither should you. For hours, they read through the letters together, each one a window into a past full of love, laughter, and the bittersweet ache of missed moments. And as the night grew darker outside, inside the cottage, the two of them found a new kind of light. Spring deepened into early summer, and the cottage garden bloomed like a quiet miracle. Kit found herself drawn outside every morning, digging her fingers into the earth, planting seeds, coaxing fragile shoots toward the sun. It wasn't just the flowers that grew, it was her spirit. Jonathan often joined her, sometimes quietly pulling weeds, other times bringing new plants, a wild rose bush, sunflowers tall as hope itself. One afternoon, as they planted a row of lavender beneath the willow tree, Kit paused, brushing soil from her palms. This garden? She said softly. It's kind of like me. Jonathan smiled. I was thinking the same thing. It's messy and wild and stubborn. She laughed. But it keeps coming back, even after the worst storms. He nodded. Just like you. There was a comfortable silence between them, filled only by the gentle hum of bees and the soft rustle of leaves. You know, Kit said, tilting her head toward the sky. I never thought I'd have a place to call my own, a real home, a place where I could feel safe. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes steady. You deserve that, and so much more. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the garden. Kit leaned back on her hands, looking at the blooming petals and the soil that had held so much promise. For the first time, she said, voice barely above a whisper, I'm starting to believe in tomorrow. Jonathan reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. We'll face it together, he promised. And in that moment, surrounded by new life and the scent of lavender, healing wasn't just a dream. It was real. Evenings at the cottage became moments Kit and Jonathan both treasured. One night, after dinner, Jonathan pulled out a dusty old photo album from the shelf, the kind with plastic sleeves and curled edges. He handed it to Kit. Look, he said softly. Inside were pictures of Mason's childhood, smiling wide, his arms around friends and family, playing in fields and chasing sunlight. And there she was again, the little girl with the curls and bright eyes, always near Mason, always laughing. Kit traced the faces in the photos, feeling the echoes of laughter that had long been silent in her own life. There was so much joy, she whispered. I forgot what it sounded like. Jonathan nodded. Mason believed laughter was the best medicine. Even when things got hard, he found a way to smile. She smiled, a little sadly. I want to find that again. Jonathan's eyes softened. You will, and I'll be here, every step of the way. That night, the cottage was filled with a quiet, kind of magic, a gentle reminder that laughter could live again, even after loss. And as Kit closed the photo album, she felt something shift inside, a spark of hope, fragile but fierce. One rainy afternoon, just as the clouds were gathering over the hills, a knock came at the cottage door. Kit opened it cautiously, surprised to see a woman standing there, mid-40s, kind eyes shadowed with regret. I'm sorry to show up like this, the woman said softly. My name is Sarah. I was Mason's mother's closest friend. Kit's heart skipped. Can I come in? Inside, Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze flickering around the cozy room filled with light and memories. I've been trying to find you for years, she said, her voice trembling a little. There's so much you don't know about Mason, about your family. Kit listened quietly, her pulse steady but curious. Sarah shared stories Mason's mother had told her before she passed, stories of love and loss, of difficult choices made to protect Kit or Ellie from a dangerous past. There was a silence after Sarah's words, heavy but not unkind. Why now? Kit finally asked. Sarah smiled sadly. Because it's time you knew the truth, and because Mason, he never stopped hoping you'd find peace. For the first time, Kit felt the weight of the past settle gently on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a bridge to healing. That evening, after Sarah left, Kit sat by the window, watching raindrops trace delicate paths down the glass. Her mind was a whirlpool of questions, emotions swirling like the storm outside. She reached for the letters again, the ones Jonathan had given her, and reread a passage Mason had written years ago. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we never speak about. But love always finds a way. Sarah's stories made the pieces fall into place, the sacrifices, the secrets, the reasons behind her mother's disappearance, the dangers they'd all faced. Jonathan came in quietly, sitting beside her without a word. She took his hand. We're not just rewriting the past, she whispered. We're healing it. Jonathan nodded, one step at a time. That night, Kit felt something fragile but real, a growing courage to face whatever came next, to live not just as the girl who was lost, but as the woman who was found. She closed her eyes, breathing in the calm, and finally allowed herself to hope. Morning light spilled softly through the curtains, painting the cottage in hues of gold and hope. Kit woke feeling different, lighter somehow. The weight of the past no longer a chain, but a foundation to build on. Jonathan was already in the garden, tending to the roses they had planted together. She stepped outside, the cool air wrapping around her like a promise. We've come so far, she said quietly. Jonathan looked up, smiling warmly. And there's still so much ahead. Together, they walked through the blooming garden, the scent of flowers mingling with the fresh morning air. Kit thought of Mason, of the love that had never faded, the secrets finally unveiled, the pain transformed into peace. She realized that sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from embracing every part of the story, dark and light, sorrow and joy. As the sun rose higher, Kit felt ready to face the future, not alone, but with those who loved her beside her. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled freely, knowing that every ending was just the beginning of something beautiful.